Got another pull up on me.
I think it's working.
And then hit OK.
Okay,
There you go.
yeah, we have activity now. Okay, Chris, awesome.
Have you for 10 seconds. I want to change something. Can you hit the start menu? It's in the bottom, bottom left-hand corner. All the way at the bottom, the Windows icon.
Down here?
Yes. And then can you go to Control Panel? Can you go from Control Panel to Sound? Sorry, I was preventing this from happening again.
Okay.
You go to Recording.
Recording.
It's up at the top. It's a tab at the top that should play back.
Okay, got it.
And nope, that's the default.
It's on microphone.
Okay, it's correct. I don't know why it keeps changing. Okay, hit OK.
Close out of this.
Yep, and then you're good to go.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, have a good night. We're good
Set,
to
Maureen?
go. Yes.
John On and Kevin Pervin, I think we solved the audio issue. If the audio stops, would you let us know?
Okay. I'm looking also on the phone, but I don't want to have two audio streams at the same time. No problem.
Okay. All right, thanks. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is the approval of the September 9th, 2020 work session and regular business meeting minutes. Does anybody, first on the work session, does anybody have any comments or changes on the work session from September 9th? No? Moving to the public business meeting minutes. I had one change on that, Maureen. There was just on page, it's minor, but page 5 in the second paragraph down, starting with Amato Galasso, the last sentence, there should be an H, it's just AS, has a law degree. It's a minor misspelling, so might as well get that right. Does anybody else have any comments or changes on the public meeting minutes? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve both the work session and public business meeting minutes from September 9th?
Motion to approve the public and work session meeting minutes as before you. Michael Mitchell. Second.
That was Glenn.
Ms. Conlon?
Yes.
Mr. Riotto?
Yes.
Mr. Homechak?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Siebesma?
Yes.
Mr. Alexandru?
Yes.
Mr. On? Mr. Boonstra?
Yes.
Kevin Pervin, you were absent. Mayor Shanley?
Yes.
Chairman Fortunato?
Yes. Next item on the agenda is, for completeness review, it's the Ryan Merce matter, 209 Zachary Court. Mr. Tenkate, you prepared a memo on this.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Could you bring us through the memo, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the applicant proposes to subdivide an adjoining piece of property with his neighbor. The neighbor's address is actually in North Haledon. The parcel being subdivided is totally landlocked and will go from one property owner to the other. The application has been submitted. I reviewed it for completeness. The only submission no variances are requested or required. There's one submission waiver for providing existing structures on the track to be divided have been shown, but not within 200 feet of the track and location of
Kevin, can you
existing
mute?
wells and septics. So, since nothing's being built on the property, I have no problem with that submission waiver. Recommend the grant. The subdivision geometry closes. It's properly drawn, and so it's here for completeness.
There's just one question I had. I know it's just for completeness now, but just for clarification. So, the applicant is the contract. He's under contract to purchase it, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And he's seeking to have subdivided and purchase just the portion that's in Wyckoff?
Correct.
So this doesn't need to go before North Hilton at all then?
No, it does not. They've already ruled it doesn't need to go beyond.
Okay. And, I mean, I looked at your memo, but just for confirmation, so there's no reason why you believe, Mr. Tenkate, this shouldn't be deemed complete at this time?
There's no reason, no.
Any board members have any comments, discussion, before we move on it?
Just one question.
Yeah.
This
DeGenero.
area, there's a lot of wetlands in there, right?
It is a wet area, yes.
Does DEP have any jurisdiction on the subdivision?
Not on the subdivision, only if it's being developed. Strictly a lot line issue.
Our intentions, or, you know,
Our-
plans? Whatever.
Nothing
Subject to
indicated.
DEP approval, right?
Right.
Anybody else? Okay, if nobody else has any objection or comments, this would be heard at the next meeting then. What's the date of the November meeting, Maureen? Do you know offhand?
It's the 9th, which is a Monday.
Okay,
It had to be moved because Veterans Day is that Wednesday,
the 11th,
and
okay,
town hall is closed.
okay. So this, can I have a motion to deem this matter complete?
Motion to deem this application complete.
Second?
Len and Mike? Ms. Conlon?
Yes.
Mr. Liato?
Yes.
Mr. Homechak?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Sietzma?
Yes.
Mr. Boonstra?
Yes.
Mr. Alexandru?
Yes.
Mr. On?
Yes.
Mr. Kervin?
Yes.
Mayor Shanley?
Yes.
Chairman Fortunato?
Yes. And Mr. Tenkate, just to clarify, because it's a minor subdivision, there's no notice required on this?
That's correct.
Okay, the only other item of business is the Galasso Enterprises matter, which is 825 Wyndham Court North, which is scheduled for the regular business meeting. Does anybody have any, I know there was some additional plans or some revised plans submitted with additional landscaping. We certainly have a lot of time, so if anybody wants to, we got 15 minutes before we can start the regular meeting. So if anybody has, any board members have any comments, questions, anything they want to discuss, now would be the time to do it. If there's anything of concern before we actually hear the rest of the testimony on this. Looks like there's been additional screening added in the revised plan. Arborvitae's appears along the, along the western section. There was a lot of discussion about that at the last meeting. And I haven't compared it to the prior one, but there may be additional screening along the south side too.
Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Boonstra.
other than the landscape plan, what are the unresolved issues with this application? Just so we know what it's about.
DeGenero, you want to take that? I think when we were here last time, I know,
There's a lot of discussion about a bridge. Then there was some discussion which continued to revolve around the landscaping, around the corner of the property where the trailers, the business owners' trailers are being parked. And I think that was about it. There was a lot of testimony given with regard to the details of the occupancy of the existing building. And there was testimony given by the wetlands expert regarding the wetland delineation line, the riparian buffer areas, and the limitations associated with such.
I know Mr. Galasso was in the middle of his testimony when we stopped
Excuse me.
last time.
My notes also indicated, I think the question was out,
the new dumpster would be actually two smaller dumpsters in there, one for garbage and one for cardboard. And I think that was agreed to.
I think the testimony was that the enclosure would be large enough to have both a regular dumpster and a recycling dumpster. And that's what appears in the minutes. Just for clarification, I guess there was some question with regard to the bridge. According to looking at this revised plan, and it's probably the same as on the prior plan, it appears that the property line for Mr. Galasso's property is right in the middle of the brook. So I guess the bridge is half on his property and half on the neighboring property in Mawa. Does that sound right, Mr. DeGennaro?
Yes.
Has there been any discussion with the applicant about that bridge since you were here last?
Mr. Chairman, sorry, Mark.
Oh, yeah,
I met
Scott?
with the applicant as a representative of the town for Public Works. And I think we'll hear through testimony that the applicant is willing to eliminate any obstruction in the brook and prevent any future problems.
And that would be a benefit to the town, correct, Scott?
Huge benefit to the town.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark.
Anybody else? Otherwise, we'll adjourn for a few minutes.
I just, one
Yeah.
other thing, I'm just
Mr. Hanley.
relying on my notes, right underneath my notes on the dumpster, it said the berm had been degraded, and I don't know whether the applicant agreed to restore it to original condition, but I think that was at least brought up. Okay, so that's understood?
There was discussion about the berm at the last meeting. I don't know that there was ever any resolution on it. Apparently, isn't there an ordinance in town that requires berm to be restored if it's become dilapidated? Are you, Mr. DeGennaro, you know anything about
I
that?
think what you're referring to is the ordinance talks about a buffer. It doesn't specifically say berm. So a buffer needs to be maintained if established under a board approval. Berm would maybe be complementary to a buffer because the plants would be planted on top of it. So I don't necessarily know that when they did this approval, there was the buffer was intended to be designed or defined as a berm. But I think the applicant is going to address that.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, just, I was granted permission to be on the property. I did a full walk around from both sides, from Mr. Brackett's side plus Mr. Galasso's side. It would be my opinion that the berm is still probably current from when it was built.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that the berm had growth on it that kind of makes the berm itself look smaller.
Okay.
So I wouldn't,
I don't know if there's an appropriate discussion for the work session.
oh, I'm just trying to give a little
Okay.
background that I did.
I'm not criticizing you.
No, I did a walk around.
As did I, and I was gonna talk about it a little later.
Yeah, we can talk about it again.
Okay, yeah.
All right, well, does anybody else have any comments at this point? Otherwise, we'll adjourn for 10 minutes until till 8 o'clock. No? Can I have a motion to adjourn the work session?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
All right, we'll pick it up at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
It looks like you wanted to say something.
Keep in mind the microphones are still live.
All right, take care.
Yeah. I got your number.
I had a minor subdivision here before, deemed to complete the work session, carried over to the regular
You
meeting.
leaving with your homework? Did you bring the subdivision or you keep it?
I'm sorry?
I might have another one.
Instead of bringing Mr. Mercer back. I represent Mr. Mercer.
Yeah, I saw that, you're here for
Matt.
Matt, yeah.
I might have to meet you somewhere.
That's a good point, so we'll do it again.
Might as well.
We'll do it again.
So you want to have it heard tonight?
Sure.
Hey, Pete,
Well, I don't know if I want to hear it.
Oh, yeah, I did it once before, you did it in the work session, carried over to the regular meeting, and just approved it.
Depends on how the time runs with,
yeah, is your applicant here?
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll see
We
what,
do it first, because it's all 5 minutes.
If we can knock it out in 5 minutes, I don't find it. I don't wanna be here.
I was 11:15 last night for Ridgewood. Exhausting.
Bruce, the last time you said 5
Like
minutes.
they started at 4 to 3 this morning.
Pete. So Mr. Whitaker is asking you, because there's no notice requirement on the subdivision, if we can hear it this evening. If we're gonna do that, Mr. Whitaker's representing it's gonna be very short, we would do it. Yeah, why don't you stay for a few minutes? Okay. You have no problem with that?
Thank you.
Attorney, be short, yeah.
I keep you for a couple minutes.
You have, is it
Attorney
just
being
your
short is
client?
an oxymoron.
Bruce?
I just have a client.
Just have your client? Okay.
No, we're gonna leave the existing, we're gonna leave the existing decking and the existing basement. I prefer to do it on rather than ordering the wood, it's just got so expensive. I'm just gonna add on. Which is good. The renovation.
That's what they did.
I don't know what happened. It's been done.
Where I live, right, the same house,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, so I did that on
Hey, John and Kevin, are you there?
Charnwood, it's essentially the same kind.
They went for a refill.
Yeah, I guess so.
But at the end of the day, it's faster, it's easier.
It's not
It's expensive from a permitting perspective.
Well, come last, I get to see.
That overall makes sense to do that.
Actually, it's a benefit to be
It's the only way you
like
stay.
that. We each can open our own plant.
It's the only way.
Yeah, no, I'll keep it
I don't
separate.
space here.
I mean, it's the only way.
Actually, the figure cost.
Everything go, you
Bad.
What is okay?
So,
Nice,
yeah.
I don't trust the decision every day.
You want your tough space?
Yeah. Looks like you got it ironed out so far.
I always forget that you went to college.
Can I get
Every once in a while, he'll say something to me like, "Oh, I saw, Mayor Shannon."
I didn't get any.
It's just funny, like two parts of my life like converging.
Delivery times, increases the whole.
Names are right there.
Yeah. Oh, there's a list?
Yeah, no.
Oh, yeah.
Bruce,
I
you've
know.
been doing, Bruce, have you been doing more in-person stuff?
Only 2 towns that I've seen, so 3 towns. Montreal, Franklin Lakes, and here. Last night I finished my 51st Zoom since June.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan. Just.
I like it, actually like the Zoom. We were in Franklin Lakes last week.
You can't build a full.
We had objections, whatever, it was exhausting. Nobody followed protocol, it was a mess.
Well, have you actually done contested hearings
Oh, yeah.
on Zoom?
Yeah.
Have you?
Done two use variances that one.
Really, came in just on Zoom.
On Zoom.
And how did, and you had
I
object?
held my breath because, you're under contract with a certain time constraint. I said, well, there's a reason to have a delay contractually, and they didn't want to hear it, and I had the contract purchaser, he says, let's try it, so we did, and we were lucky, fortunate, got it through.
And how'd you have to get the objectors all involved?
They, one at a time. One at a time, it's exhausting. I was 3.5 hours.
Did you present exhibits online?
Yeah, we did a split screen.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it's very, very doable. Planners like it. In one instance, my planner expert was in Tennessee.
Can I add to your burden?
Makes it easier for you, in some ways.
Yeah. So I was against it starting out, but I have to tell you afterwards.
Well, it's a question of mastering the technology, right? That's what it all comes down to, right?
Yeah. And I still do it as if I were having a hearing. in a room, so I'm still doing dress rehearsal with all my witnesses and going over everything just like anything else.
And you're completely, you don't have anybody with you.
Fine with me.
You're completely alone.
Yeah.
So Bruce, you know the old saying, revenue is a gift, right?
Yes. Less is more. Okay.
Also like state rent.
Hey, Bruce, with regard to the Galasso matter, are you gonna bring Mr. Galasso back right away, or are you gonna bring your engineer back and then bring Mr. Galasso later?
I've got Mr. Galasso here and my engineer. I'm gonna give you some stipulations. The only thing you missed on your list was we're gonna show you the sign, because you wanted to see that too.
Yeah, I was asking about that.
Yeah, we
You-
have
you-
that.
You didn't submit that,
We have
right?
that, we're gonna go over the landscaping,
Do you need this?
and we're gonna stipulate.
You finished with this?
Yeah, right.
We have stipulations that you want to hear.
Good, how are you?
Ridgewood was so backed up with their zoning board, they do 3 meetings a month on Zoom. From 7:30 to 11:15. That's tiring.
No.
5 to 6 at night. But that's because they're so backed up.
They didn't have a meeting for several months?
They missed May, but they're always a busy board. Upper Saddle River has 60 applications for swimming pools, of which 40 need variance. I said to one of my clients, don't buy a swimsuit until 2022. And the pool companies, I'm told, saying the same thing, right? Yeah. I have a couple of clients, a couple of friends of mine in it. They've booked
No, I ran into the same
Let's
Derby shot. The moving guy from West Main Street.
Sure, I know, yeah.
He's been there, every show been in town for as long as I can.
Yeah, was his father then?
His father, actually, he sold the business recently.
Yeah, he went to Ridgewood. Barbara went to Ridgewood. Yeah.
Did he?
Oh, Ridgewood was using space like that, but Ridgewood was planning like, yeah.
Okay. I said, how's business? He said, we can't keep up with that.
No, you can't. I tell my residents,
This way,
I tell my residents, yeah, my residential clients, you know, real estate. I said, I didn't learn this in law school, but once you, my seller was, once you are out of attorney review, start calling Ubers in anticipation. End of the month, you will get it. Right. Because it's taking longer, and they, you know, Ubers that know nothing about New York City have to go in there now, because that's where it's coming.
Right.
Can't hear you.
Classic plan I got from a client, and it's a little scary, living in New York City. I don't want to move out of the city, but I have to. But I have to not.
Yes, we have 3 seats.
But that's not good. That's not a
Tell
good
them,
thing.
My brother-in-law,
you know, well, when they come in, I'll show you.
Right, right.
he said, there's like nobody on the street. You see, you realize how many times.
And the more than last time. I had a fellow from Ohio. But they worked on most of the details. Car up to the curb. Maybe they heard support. Opened up the trunk to get the stuff out.
Just,
Homeless. They walked with somebody else. Picked the stuff out of the
And
trunk,
that
walked
side?
away with it. Nobody there to help. Lost everything.
So there's 4 more?
2 o'clock in the afternoon.
yep. Over there, sir, on that side of the room, please. Thank you, yep. That's,
I think that's someone's seat there.
Somebody's already sitting there.
Well, there's a seat in the back there. On the right.
oh, Amato's sitting over, okay.
I'm not sure what time you got.
Okay, I got it on the dot.
You're on the dot.
You got 8 o'clock?
According to the iPhone.
Yep. Yep.
John, Ann, and Kevin Pervin, are you on the line?
John, I'm here. Yeah, Kevin first here.
Okay. All right, we can get going. The October 14th, 2020 public meeting of the Wyckoff Planning Board is now in session. In accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, notice of this meeting appears on our annual schedule of meetings. Copy of said annual schedule has been posted on the bulletin board in Memorial Town Hall. Copy has been filed with the Township Clerk, the Record, the Ridgewood News, and the North Jersey Herald and News, all newspapers with general circulation throughout the Township of Wyckoff. At least 48 hours prior to this meeting, the agenda thereof was similarly posted, filed, and mailed to said newspapers. All applicants are hereby reminded that your application, if approved, may be subject to the terms, conditions, and payment of the affordable housing development fee requirements of the township. Information can be obtained from the Code of the Township of Wyckoff, Chapter 113-8 on the township's website, www.wyckoff-nj.com. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Will we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Maureen, can we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Conlon. Here. Mr. Riato.
Here.
Mr. Homechak.
Here.
Mr. Fisher.
Here.
Mr. Sietzma.
Here.
Mr. Boonstra.
Here.
Mr. Pervin.
Here.
Mr. Alexandru.
Here.
Mr. On.
Here.
Mayor Shanley.
Here.
Chairman Fortunato.
Here. Okay, at the work session, we approved the September 9th, 2020 work session and regular business meeting minutes. We also approved the Merce matter, 209 Zachary Court, for completeness. And we have a matter on the Galasso matter, which is 825 Wyndham Court North, is on for continuation this evening. What we have decided to do, and John and Kevin, we are going to hear the Merce application that we deemed complete at the work session. It should be a short application. We're going to hear that first. So if you have that paperwork, or get it if you put it away, and then we'll continue with the Galasso Enterprises matter. Mr. Whitaker is the attorney on both. So, Mr. Whitaker, why don't you come forward on that? And on the Merce matter, this is 208 Zachary Court, 209 Zachary Court.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Bruce Whitaker from the firm of McDonald Whitaker, representing Ryan Merce. This is a minor subdivision application. You've deemed it complete, as the chairman stated. There is no new lot being created. There is no development proposed. It is merely to modify lot lines, to add property to Mr. Merce's property and take it away from the adjoining lot. It just creates a larger lot for my client. It is an area that has no improvements on it, and on the basis of that, the applicant seeks minor subdivision approval. We would complete the subdivision and perfect it by deed, and submit the deed descriptions to Biological Engineering for their review and approval before filing deeds to perfect the subdivision. Again, no lot is being created, no development being proposed. It's merely a swapping of land. That's basically an overview of it.
Just a question. In both Mr. Rogers' letter and Boswell engineer report, it speaks in terms of having county review and approval.
County will exempt this from approval. So there's an exemption process in Bergen County. It'll be submitted to Bergen County Planning Board for an exemption.
Now, and I'm laying that out to the board, we want to have that exemption from approval as a condition.
Absolutely, it's another agency, it has to be.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that we're on the
Absolutely.
same page.
I can say I've had the benefit of the 10-case report, we can comply with everything set forth in the report.
There's just one other issue, and that was, and I think we did grant completeness review, but and I think we should also mention in there the applicant's sort of waiver from the requirement of providing a plat with all existing structures. That was referred to in Mr. Tenkate's.
That request is made, yes.
just wanna make sure that's there, because I wanna, if the board grants this, I wanna make sure that that's gonna be part of the resolution.
Absolutely.
Mr. Whitaker, has the application to Bergen County been started yet? Or were you waiting for a decision by this board?
I'm told, covering for Mr. Rogers, I'm told it's been sent down. There's a, as Mr. Tenkate knows, there's a language you put on the map, and they sign off on it as a exemption. And the reason they exempt is there's no development, there's no impervious, it's not on a county road.
Okay, I understand you have a witness, you can proceed.
Mr. Merce? Come up here. Stand right over here, right there. Just raise your right hand and be sworn in.
Kevin, you gonna do that?
You, you swear you tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I did.
State your name and address, please.
Ryan Merce, 209 Zachary Court, Wyckoff, New Jersey.
Mr. Merce, you're the record owner of this property, is that correct?
Yes.
And is it correct to say that you are in contract subject to subdivision approval being granted to purchase a portion of the property of your neighbors as shown and depicted on the survey that's been made part of the application?
Yes.
And I have stipulated that there's no development being proposed, nothing but merely adding additional property to your property and just readjusting a lot line. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you understand that on the basis of this, you've also made a request not to show buildings around your property, and you asked for a waiver from that, from the ordinances in Wyckoff, correct?
Yes.
And on the basis of that, you recognize that as a stipulation, we have to comply with the requirements from Mr. Tenkate in his report, and we have to submit to get an exemption from the Bergen County Planning Board.
Yes.
Nothing further.
Questions from the board? Well, Mr. Mercer, I have a question. So, as stated by your attorney, but I'll ask you, do you have any intention of developing or building on this parcel?
No.
Is there any other reason you're seeking to obtain it other than just to increase your property?
I mean, it's a wooded area. I enjoy the privacy, and I'd like to keep it wooded, so.
Plans to plant a little corn or pumpkins or anything like that?
I mean, I have 4 children, so.
We like agriculture.
Yeah, that they can run around in there.
It's pretty wooded.
Anybody on the board have any questions of Mr. Merce?
Somewhere I read that about the doghouse. You want to talk about that? I don't think we need to. Who says it? It straddles. Maybe the two neighbors share it, huh? It's currently astride the property line that exists between these two neighbors. And it's gonna stay that way, evidently.
Right, the doghouse is shown on the plan?
Yes, I mean, I can ask my neighbor to move it, but.
Everybody gets along, it's refreshing.
Who does it belong to, do you know?
It belongs to my neighbor who is, I'm subdividing the property with. I just didn't realize it was on the property line.
Part of it's on your property, encroaching on your property.
Okay.
If you want to straighten it out, now's the time to do it.
Okay.
Anybody else? We're gonna have to open this up to the public too. So I gotta read the, yeah. Does anybody else before I open to the public, does anybody else on the board have any questions of Mr. Merce or Mr. Whitaker? No? Okay, I'm gonna open it up to the public. I need to make this announcement though. The time for public questions and comments is now open. If you wish to ask a question or make a comment, please dial 201-891-7000, extension 222. We will take calls in the order in which they are received. If the line is busy, please wait a moment and then try again. You'll be able to easily observe when a call has been completed as you are watching the meeting live on YouTube. Once you are on the line, we will ask that you mute the device on which you are watching the live stream so as to minimize any interference with the audio. So we will just give it about a minute to see if anybody calls in. If nobody calls in, we will close the public session. No indication anyone's calling in, right? Okay. Does not appear that anybody's calling in on this matter. So we'll close the
I
pub.
have,
Go ahead.
I
Yeah.
have one more comment.
Okay, yeah, I'm just gonna close the public comment section, and then we'll open it up for the board again. Go ahead, Mr. Butcher.
I assume for the record that the remaining lot on Ivy Court is a conforming lot based on North Haven standards? I just want to reaffirm that.
Yeah.
Okay, because I wouldn't want Mayor George to call Mayor Shannon and say, what the heck are you guys doing here Wednesday night?
We checked that out.
With a
before.
substandard lot.
We checked out and
Okay.
confirmed before we came here.
Okay, fine, thank you.
This matter, well, according to Mr. Tenkate, this matter doesn't have to be any notice or anything done with North Haven at all?
Absolutely.
So they're unaware of the application?
Mr. Rogers contacted them to make sure they were waiving jurisdiction.
So they waived their jurisdiction.
There's nothing going on their property. This property is entirely in Wyckoff.
Yeah, I know, we've been down this road before.
I've been down this road with you.
Yeah, well, you did the presentation, I think.
That's right.
It was at Franklin Lakes, and they got hurt at Franklin Lakes.
This one, Franklin Lakes, North Haven already ruled that they don't need to see it.
Right.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, but they're aware of it. They were made aware of it.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I think Mayor Shanley and Mr. Buncher just wanted to make sure that they were aware, give them the courtesy of being aware of the application. But that apparently is the case, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else have any comments on the board? Seeing none or hearing none? Yes, John on. Go ahead, John. Yes, John.
My only comment is, I think last year we had an application where the applicant's intent was not to do something, and then that changed. So, and then, Mr. Boonstra had asked if, the applicant had any intentions of developing the property. I would want to try to make sure that his intentions are recorded as part of whatever we provide, so that the intention doesn't change, after we provide the approval. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what you're saying. I mean, Mr. Merce stated that he has no intentions to develop the property.
Right, and so I would like to make sure that we somehow record that as part of the approval, so that it's not just a verbal intention. And I forgot which application it was last year, but the applicant got no intention of.
That was the Lonigan matter.
Initially, and then they, they did, and then we had to reach the full application, so I just wanna keep an eye out for that.
Well, this cannot be conditioned on the applicant not developing the property in the future, correct? No, he'd have to come before the board
You have to come before.
with any application. And if the application required a variance or something along those lines, either the planning board or the zoning board would hear it.
That's correct.
Okay,
So,
alright, that's it then.
okay. All right, your comments are noted, Mr. Hahn, though.
I wanted to say for the record, on this street, it's a beautiful street. I mean, it's, 4 properties on it, very residential. This is, combining these 2 properties together is going to be just enhance the neighborhood and the property. I don't really see any problem with, this would be landlocked. I don't see any issue with, development in the future.
Okay. Anybody else? If not, can I have a motion to approve this matter?
I'll make a motion to approve the application of Ryan Merce, 209 Zachary Court, Block 428, Lot 3.05, to allow him to acquire 21,098 square feet of land from the adjacent property owner and affix it to his current lot.
I'll second it.
Ms. Conlon?
Yes.
Mr. Beato?
Yes.
Mr. Homechek?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Seetsma?
Yes.
Mr. Boonstra?
Yes.
Mr. Kervin?
Yeah,
Mr. Alexandru?
Yes.
Mr. An?
yeah,
Mayor Shanley.
Yes.
Chairman Fortunato.
Yes. All right, thank you, Mr. Merce.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving right along, we'll go on to the Galasso Enterprises matter, 825 Wyndham Court North. Mr. Whitaker, you can proceed with that matter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Bruce Whitaker from the firm McDonald Whitaker representing the applicant. This is a continuation of the public hearing in connection with amended site plan seeking variance relief, some relief from waivers, and some sort of movement. The applicant.
Mr. Whitaker, just give
Hang on
us,
1 second,
just give
Bruce.
us 1 minute while we try to take care of this feedback.
Kevin, please mute your phone. Thank you.
If he mutes his phone,
Well,
he can't
He
comment?
can hear us, but we can't hear him.
Comment when he needs to speak.
Okay.
I just unmute.
He would need to take
Just
it
want
off
him
mute.
to unmute when he wants to speak.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Mr. Whitaker.
As I was stating, the applicant presented its application at the last meeting. Just a very quick recap. If you recall, the testimony was given by the applicant's expert witness in the field of environmental, and we concluded with that. Mr. Westbrook, the applicant's engineer, testified and concluded with his presentation. Mr. Galasso had testified as to what his intentions were in developing the site, and we stopped there, and the board gave us a list of some things that they wanted us to go back and address. And so tonight, the purpose of this continuation is to respond to the things you wanted us to address. Overview of what they are, a landscape plan which we're prepared to testify to this evening that will show adequate buffering around the property itself. Number 2, expansion of the dumpsters so it will accommodate both refuse as well as cardboard. Number 3 was the removal of an obstruction over by the bridge area, and you'll get testimony regarding that, and confirmation and stipulated the obstruction is going to be removed. And number 4, you wanted to see a prototype of the sign, which we have here this evening. So that's an overview of the application. I'd like to call Mr. Westbrook back for the purposes of taking us through the landscape plan. I think that's the largest of the 4 issues that we need to talk about. I have Mr. Galasso here. He's been out on the site. I know that he's interacted with Mr. Fisher, who was there on behalf of the township, and to inspect the site and bring back some knowledge to the board regarding that. And so with that as an overview, I have nothing else but to call Mr. Westbrook back.
Mr. Whitaker, would you just because some board members, including me, I don't have the prior plan in front of me, do you just ask Mr. Westbrook to highlight the changes that he's made with the current plan?
Yes, that's what I plan on doing.
Okay.
Actually, my first question.
Very good.
Mr. Westbrook, you're still under oath. You prepared a landscape plan that's on the board this evening, correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Hanley will mark that as an exhibit. I think it's A4. We can mark it as A1 with October 14th as the date.
I have the last one marked as A3 from the last meeting.
Yeah, so this would be A4.
A4.
Mr. Westbrook, I would like you to take us through what changes have been made on this plan that are proposed to be installed.
After the last meeting, I had the opportunity to walk the sidewalk with the applicant and the neighbors. She met out there twice, first with one neighbor, then with 2 neighbors to the west side where the screening was the heart of discussion. From that meeting, and literally during that meeting, we walked around and I pretended I was a tree. Okay, this is where we're gonna plant a tree. You're down on your property, what do you see? Should I move this way? Should I move that way? And that's how we came up with the modifications that you see here. The plan is revised 9/16/20. It's the same plan that was submitted to the board. The change to the plan is in 2 parts. We've added arborvitae's in the area closest to where the trailers are parked, the discussion heard about trailers. In order to facilitate that, we actually have to remove some of the taller trees. 1, to physically plant the tree, and 2, to help get sunlight in there so that the tree that we're planting becomes effective. Because the trees that are there today provide no screening down at ground level.
Would you say that some of the trees that are being removed now are trees that are compromised?
Yes, some are leaning heavily, they were on the weed tree that tries to grow outside the canopy and reach for sunlight. Very visible, a number of trees in that area, and then at the south end, that was up the north end, at the south end, we're also removing one tree. The second part of the landscaping that we're changing is the original path took more of a westerly or southwesterly, there's two, for lack of a better term, ridge line in this area. And we were taking the westerly one, putting it closer to the property line, but with our walkthrough with the neighbors, it actually felt more appropriate to bring it closer to the building, bring it as shown on this plan, remove the one tree and plant the trees in that area. The sum total, we're at 102 new trees, where we're at 82, so we're increasing by 20. And we were removing 7, we're now removing 13. So we removed 6 of the trees that are in poor shape or poor screening ability, and we're adding in 20 to create the screening that the neighbors, collectively want.
And these arborvitae are basically the generic green giant arborvitae that are deer resistant and can grow in the areas that you're proposing?
That's correct. They're deer resistant. They're also the type of arborvitaes in general that, given a year or two or a growing season or two, and the roots take hold, and then they start growing, and they'll grow to, grow until you trim them, but they'll grow 30 feet tall if you let them.
And they will serve as an appropriate buffer because they will intertwine, correct?
Yes, they intertwine, and they serve a better buffer than what was planted there back in the 1980s, which were white pines predominantly, that as they grow old, they limb up. So the bottom of the trees no longer form screen. Arborvitaes hold their shape, hold their branches throughout its height.
And what I've learned with white pines also, they become what they call leggy, correct?
Yes.
So with that said, what's the other proposed modifications to the plan? Dumpster. Dumpster's going to be designed and will be the size to accommodate both cardboard as well as refuse,
Right,
correct?
that's not a change to the plan. That was always the intent,
Right,
and there's no change there.
okay. There is a sign being proposed to show the location of the sign. I'll have Mr. Galasso show the actual exhibit.
The sign I'll point to is 20 feet off the property line, at the cul-de-sac along the southern driveway.
And so, answer an anticipated question from the board, we're not proposing to light it.
And the sign will be conforming in location and size, correct?
Location and size, yes. Other than that, all of the testimony you provided the last time, all of the descriptions you gave as it pertains to the parking spaces, ingress, egress, et cetera, everything else remains the same.
Correct.
Questions?
Do you intend on irrigating any of the new plantings?
It needs to be irrigated. You have that undergrowth, it needs, you have too many trees, too much vegetation fighting each other.
Are there any proposed changes along the south line of the property, or that landscape plan is the same as it was last time you presented?
Same as it was presented.
You mentioned roughly a 2-year period for the trees to get well situated, for lack of a better word. We need some sort of a guarantee that any trees that don't become well situated are properly replaced.
Well, you
Do you have
have
that 2-year period?
You have basically a developer's agreement that I've worked with Mr. Mandel in the past for a development like this that has that provision in paragraph pertaining to landscape.
Okay, just so we're on the right of that.
Anybody else? Questions of the engineer before we open it up to the public?
Just one other thing, Mr. Lockwell. So you're noting these as 15-gallon containers. I think we prefer ball and burlap versus the 15-gallon container.
Okay. Again, from my perspective, it's really the height.
Right.
Um,
But they will,
Roll-out versus container.
they will do better, especially at this time of the year, if they're blowing.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, we're gonna open us up to the public first. Again, and this is only the public, any members of the public are gonna have an opportunity to speak after the presentation as to anything they want to. Right now, it's just questions of the applicant's engineer. So anybody present in the room and anybody listening on YouTube or viewing on YouTube, if you have questions of the applicant's engineer, you should call in now. But in the meantime, I'll open it up to anybody who's present in the room. Does anybody have any questions of Mr. Westbrook? Yes, sir,
About the
please.
landscape and the dumpster?
Please come forward, identify yourself
Sure.
and your address.
Mike Rifflord, 341 Brookside Ave, Wyckoff.
Can you spell your last name? I'm sorry.
Riff, that's Frank, Lardu.
So where's your property located in relation to the?
On lot 15.
You are lot 15. You're in the corner?
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
So my question is, one, the dumpster, is there any place else that this can go, or is that open for any kind of discussion? Because our property's on Brookside, we look down, so, I mean, it's gonna be a pretty clear shot to the dumpster. Is there, I mean, I know now, I think, isn't it over by the condominiums, the townhomes?
It is currently down over in that area, however, because of the DEP requirements, that area of the site is subject to some DEP restrictions.
Mhm.
So the dumpster was moved up to the west side of the property. Where it's located now fits well in terms of functionality for the refuse vehicle to access it. And I would say from your property, we tried to understand your concerns and propose screening around it, so you have similar arborvitaes that will grow up, and you won't be able to see down into the dumpster once they grow.
I wasn't able to make the last meeting, I had to work. About, I guess, a year ago, one of the meetings, we had talked about putting some arborvitaes here. And I noticed we have all this and some in here, but there's like nothing over here. Is there any way to get something in this area? It's just a little open right here. Anything would help screen that dumpster even more. And the other thing is, I did speak to the applicant about this, that it's not used for any type of food, because it's just warehouse right now. Is there any guarantees we can keep it that way? Like, I don't know if maybe a catering company comes in or something, and then they start putting food in. I just don't want, problems.
Well, we cannot change what the allowable uses are on the property, so maybe Mr. DeGenero can answer if that's an allowable use or not.
Yeah, is that an allowable use?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
If it's an allowable use, sir, we can't restrict that. Your concern is with screening on the south side between the area of the dumpster and the arborvitaes that are shown on the plan on the south side. There's an opening there of
Correct.
approximately, how big is that, Mr. Westbrook, in feet?
From the arborvitae proposed by the dumpster to the arborvitae proposed to the screen to the west side, there's 70 feet.
Excuse me, if you could just move over a little bit so I can see. I scared the,
You did.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, I couldn't see what.
Between the two arborvitaes, the proposed arborvitae areas, it's 70 feet. Within that area, there is 8 trees.
Is your concern that area, sir, or is it to the other side?
Actually, it's more towards this side. It's kind of like, it's, I guess.
I think his concern is to the other
It's
side of the
less than
dumpster
the
enclosure. If
Well,
I'm,
okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question.
Is that correct, sir?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, there is about 40 feet from the arborvitae's of the dumpster to the property line.
Right.
You know, there's 2 trees in that immediate area, on the applicant's property. There's 3 trees on the neighbor's property.
Right.
So you have a series of trees in through that area. My recollection is, during times of the year, there's underbrush in there as well.
Well, you're showing trees on the,
This is what I was.
they're existing trees, but if you were to put arborvitae's in front of the trees closer to the building, you could actually create some more screening, couldn't you?
I'm not, quite frankly, I'm not sure how much more screening you can add. There's arborvitae's right against the dumpster enclosure. The enclosure itself, which is, if I heard his concern correctly, is proposed to be screened.
I have a question. Can't they put trees on their property?
Wait, well, George, let's answer this question first, though.
But that's my question.
What-
I'm not trying to answer questions. I'm just trying to kind of get an idea of why we're turning this to the applicant having to plant trees, and rather than if you live there and you don't like the view, you can plant your own trees, correct?
Well, we're not turning it into anything. We're simply asking a question as to whether or not his concern is additional screening. It's before us now.
But he
so
could provide his own screening if he doesn't want.
Conceivably,
to
he
look at
could.
it, right? So why are we having this discussion is my question.
Well, because it's a discussion.
Okay.
So is your concern, sir, that you don't want to be able to see the building at all? Is that?
Oh, well, that would be great, but, I mean, you know, I knew the building was there when I bought the house, so, you know, I understand that. You know, part of my concern, I guess, is really the location of the dumpster, but you're telling me that that's where the DEP is telling me it needs to go. Is that correct?
I'm saying the DEP would have issues with where it currently is down close to the river. So it was moved up to a functional location up in the site.
And that's the only other functional spot that's far enough away from the river that it'll work, or?
It's the one that makes most sense to me. You have parking, you have access to the building. You know, we're creating that space that's in line with the drive aisle, so it's a functional pickup. The least amount of,
Sorry, I don't mean to, but this is where we're coming in over here, correct? And then coming around the building? You're saying that, this is, isn't this, I don't know if I can read this perfectly. Is this parking in this area here?
where you're pointing to is the east side of the building.
Right.
That's all parking right now, paved parking areas. We're looking at the landscaping plan, so it doesn't show the striping of the stalls,
Right.
but yes, there's all parking through there.
And there's nothing, I mean, I know that this is, the river, I assume, is right in here at this dotted line, is that correct? Or we're in that vicinity? Oh, wait, I see the trees here, so it's on the other side?
There's a number of lines there between starting at the north, river, property line, river,
Got it.
environmental stream.
Mr. Wasbrook, if I may, on the, I guess that's the south side of the building, you have intermittent rows of new arborvitae. One is 9, one is 7, and one is 4. And I'm not looking to get, why are they intermittent there? if I
They're
may ask?
they're intermittent because there are, I believe prior to Mr. Galasso taking ownership of the property, his predecessor had tried to plant some additional white pines to supplement the tall white pines, so there's some lower growth.
There's some existing stuff there already.
Yes, so this is just to supplement what is there.
Because I noticed further to the west, where Mr. Rippard is concerned with, following that reasoning, it might be appropriate to put an intermittent line as a backup between that dumpster and his property. Maybe 6 or 7 or 8, a row of 6 or 7 or 8, like you have along the drive aisle there.
So there are, from the intermittent arborvitae's, are 4 trees, plus our proposed arborvitae's around the screen, to screen the dumpster itself. This comment's kind of new to me. Part of a surprise because the neighbor had cut some of the trees down on his own property, and he has every right to. But if you're concerned about screening, I'm not sure the context there.
I also think that, Rudy, that the trees that they're proposing, you've got 6 6-foot arborvitae green giants. In 2 years, they're gonna be 8 to 10 feet. You're not gonna see that dumpster from across town, nevertheless next door.
I'm just asking, I'm just looking for a
No,
solution.
that's my opinion as far as,
Yeah, okay.
you know, I mean, and there is also growth on that hill, and the more stuff you put under it, the less it's gonna grow anyway. Because it's just gonna get choked out.
Well, that was my next question. If you should create, is there any impediment to creating, let's say,
Well,
a
the
7
resident,
foot,
the
well, that's
resident,
Mr. Westbrook.
yeah,
In the area, 30 feet to the west of the furthest one, right? Is it, I don't know what those trees are that are noted here. Are they deciduous, or are they white pine, overgrown white pines, or what?
I don't recall those specifically off the
Yeah.
top of my head, but I proposed the
There's a-
arborvitae
that's
where I
a-
thought we could get additional screen growth to be effective. You know, I didn't propose it further to the west because I didn't think it would be effective.
Was this gentleman one of the people you guys met with on the property, or?
I did not know.
Okay.
Like I said, I wasn't able to make the last meeting. I didn't know that you guys were having a meeting with the neighbors.
So, Rob, Denise in the overflow room is texting me that Mr. Rifflard's wife would like to come in and speak in lieu of her husband speaking.
Okay. As soon
I
as,
have her,
well, do we have room for her to come in now?
he would have to go back, I guess.
Unless we could ask,
That's what she's gonna be asking questions. Because right now, we're doing questions from the engineer.
Oh, in addition to her husband.
it would only be for questions of the engineer right now. Okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry,
W-
no. Only on this time.
Does anybody have any other
I mean, well,
any questions?
when you guys met, this is all new here, is that correct?
It's modified from what was proposed previously.
Right, okay. And this was the screen,
Primarily to the west. It's the screen on the west.
it was to screen the building.
Just to screen the building, no, not so much the building, it's more to screen, the trailers.
Is that where they're going?
The trailers are parked in this area, and then other vehicles are parked through here, so it's a screening of the vehicles, it's the low screening. Does it screen the building as well? Yes, but the building is much further away from the property
Right,
line.
but yeah, this was really more for the trailers and for the parked vehicles.
The taller trees with the higher canopy and the distance provides more screening of the building.
Sir, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking for, so, I mean,
Well,
if you want to
originally-
clarify, and you can certainly, we can certainly ask if they're willing to do that, they may not be, but it has to be clear. I'm not exactly sure what I understand where your property is, and that you're concerned about screening. There is screening that's to enclose the dumpster now, and are you concerned that the screening around the dumpster is inadequate, or are you concerned that there's not screening going away from the dumpster?
Well, I mean, first of all, it was the location of the dumpster, that was my first issue, really. But if that can't be moved, which, I mean, I can't believe that it can't be moved anywhere, but,
What's your concern about the location of the dumpster, provided it's screened?
well, it's back to if there is ever any food in it.
Well, we can't control that, sir, but how far is the dumpster location as proposed from his property line now?
Checking my glasses on this time. From the dumpster to the property line is 50 feet.
And then how far is your house off the property line, sir?
It's pretty far.
Off the pavement.
What is pretty far?
I don't know, I haven't measured it.
I mean, is it twice that distance? Is it 100
Yeah,
feet?
it's probably, I'm gonna say it's probably 100 feet.
So you're probably 150 feet from the proposed location of the dumpster?
Yeah.
Okay. You have anything further, sir?
No, I guess not.
May I ask a question now, or do I ask it later?
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Whitaker.
How long have you owned the home?
4.5 years.
Have you done any exterior work in connection with removal of trees?
Yes.
Or any construction outside? Looking at,
Construction, well, only in the front of the house construction.
okay, in the rear of the property, have you removed any trees?
Yes.
How many trees did you remove?
I'm not exactly sure, to be honest.
Could you show me the location of where those trees were removed?
It's hard, I don't know exactly where we are on my property, but it was.
Well, this is the rear of your property, this is the
Right.
northern end. This is
Right.
the north northeast corner.
This is the wooded area here.
Did you remove trees in this area over here?
Back in here, no, we were like in here.
So
And,
this area between the property line and where you removed the trees, there are trees there now, you just said the woods.
well, it's the wooded area there. And I actually planted some trees in the south.
Okay. And what was the purpose of removing the trees on the property?
Well, I had a couple of trees that were most of the trees were in decline. And they were leaning towards, even though my house is far away, I had a tree expert there, and he said they were tall enough, didn't want them hitting my deck or anything like that.
But there are still trees in that northeastern corner of the
Yes, there
property
are.
that remains.
Yes, there are.
Thank you.
Anybody have any further questions? Okay, does anybody else from the public wish to ask Mr. Westbrook any questions? We have anybody on the phone, Maureen? No, we don't, okay. And does,
Mr. Ricklard's wife was standing in the doorway. Did she leave?
hi, Miss, she can come in, I assume, right? Miss, why don't you come in and identify, do you have any, this would be questions specifically for the engineer. So there's gonna be an opportunity for the public to speak about whatever they want at the end. But right now, it would only be as to questions of the engineer. Do you have questions of the engineer?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Please come forward and identify yourself.
Tony Ann Rickford, 341 Brookside Ave.
I'm sorry, what's your first name?
Tony Ann Rickford.
Go ahead, then.
We were not here at the last meeting. My husband was working. Prior to that, we were here, and we talked about this, and it was written down, and we spoke to a motto personally that said anything that needed to be done, could be done, would be done to improve his property and ours. Right now, there are extra trees put in, it's a new plan, to the left, which is our neighbors, the Brackets, and there are no trees where a motto, and we discussed what was written from the left of the Brackets towards the dumpster. And to the question that was asked about us having trees, we had trees that we had to clean up. There was brush and trees and limbs from multiple storms, and that kept coming down through the last 3 years that we were there, that we had to clean up.
Yeah, Miss, right now, you're gonna have an opportunity to speak generally, but right now, just procedurally,
The tree.
if you have a question of the engineer, ask him specifically and let it get a response from him, and then you'll have another opportunity farther down the line.
Okay, so behind my yard, there was a question the last time that we were gonna have some type of arborvitae's or something with the colosso for putting them in. They're not there on this plan. That's my question.
Mr. Westbrook, did you ever talk to Mr. Galasso? I guess the question is, did you ever talk to Mr. Galasso about putting screening there based on your understanding of Mr. Galasso's conversation with this neighbor?
Not specifically in reference to neighbor, well, I guess it wasn't a neighbor.
I think it was type 10.
The trees that Mr. Gloss and I spoke about, and they're on this plan, were to screen the trailers. And that is along the south side of the area where the trailer are parked, with the intent that that line of trees, the east-west row of trees, provide screening from anybody to the south of the trailers. The refuse area, we also proposed screening. We did not have discussions of adding additional screening other than the trees that are there. There are a number, like I said, there's a number of trees there, and you end up having to cut more trees down to plant again.
All right, so let me ask you this question. And this is your application, so you guys present it the way you want. As a feasibility question, is it possible to add further screening to both sides of the dumpster, the proposed dumpster location?
When we spoke at that time, the
Okay.
dumpster had. a-
Question being asked.
Yeah, let Mr. Westbrook answer the question.
I'm not confident the survivability of planting extra trees without first removing trees. That doesn't make sense to me. Between the separation distance, like I said, 50 feet from the dumpster to the property line, plus maybe another twice that amount to the house. I don't see the added benefit of trying to infill between the screening that is there already.
my children and my grandchildren and myself are not 150 feet from those trees to my house. I am exactly there every single day in the sun, using my yard, trying to improve my yard too.
What is the question?
So I would like the trees to be put there by the Galasso firm, which was originally stated to me from the beginning and throughout the course, and was documented here.
Well, Miss, maybe it'd be appropriate, Mr. Galasso is gonna testify after the engineer, so maybe it would be appropriate to ask those questions of Mr. Galasso, because you're saying that you had a conversation with him, correct?
Mhm.
You did, okay. So if you don't have anything more specific to Mr. Westbrook right now, we can move off of him, and then when Mr. Galasso testifies, you and your husband would have an opportunity to question him about what your discussions were, et cetera. Does that work for you?
Yes, it does, and it was quoted here also.
Okay, well, you're gonna have another opportunity, we just wanna keep things ordered. So if you don't have any specific questions of Mr. Westbrook right now, we're gonna move on.
Now, one more.
Go ahead.
One more. The dumpster, which is now new in this position, the trees that are being planted here are 6-foot trees. I don't know how high the dumpster is, but the dumpster trees now are 5-foot trees. My house, which we want to say 150 feet.
Well, ask Mr. Westbrook.
150
How high are the dumpsters, Mr.
for
Westbrook?
clear view. So does that tree have to be 5 foot now?
The trees are proposed to be 5 foot, but there's a grade change into that area, that adds another foot or two, so, you know, they're slightly taller. But more importantly, is arborvitaes grow quickly, and they will grow well above the dumpster height in a short period of time, a couple of years.
That's not
Mr. Westbrook, just so the record's clear, how high is the dumpster itself?
Dumpster fence is, let me look at the detail, 6 feet from memory.
On the inside of the proposed arborvitae's, there's an enclosure?
There's an enclosure with a board-on-board enclosure, 6 foot high. So you've got arborvitae's reinforced with essentially board-on-board fencing. The combination of the two screen the dumpsters themselves.
And how high approximately are the dumpsters themselves?
The dumpster itself,
Just fine.
yeah, it's about this high.
Approximately 5 feet?
Walking up to it's about 5 feet high. And in addition, there is a little landscape wall on the south side of the dumpster enclosure to work the grade. And that's 2.5 feet high in and of itself. So you've got 2.5 plus 5.5 or 5 to 6, so say 5.5. You're at 8 feet there with the top of the tree in front of a 6 foot high fence and then the dumpster.
Miss, do you have any other questions of the engineer? Again, you're gonna have an opportunity to question Mr. Galasso, but do you have any other questions of him right now? We're not making a decision at this time, anything like that?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. You can have she can stay here, right?
If there's this, if
I
there's
think
an
there's a
empty
seat there, ma'am, you can stay there. All right, go ahead, Mr. Whitaker. Does the board have any other questions of Mr. Westbrook?
Could the dumpster fence on the two sides of the arborvitae, could it be 8 foot high?
Not without a variance. Mr.
there.
DeGenaro,
Repeat the answer.
Okay, John,
6
you're on
foot,
speaker.
Mr. DeGenaro, 6 foot is the highest fence
You're welcome.
the town permits. And that's what's used with dumpsters all around.
Yeah, but I'm just
The
saying,
6
because
foot high fence
all
around
the
the
properties
dumpster
are way up higher and they look down. You're not actually getting the benefit because of the height, topological difference between where the houses are and where the dumpster is.
You got 4 feet on the dumpster, 6 feet on the fencing, right? And then 5 feet arborvitae's that are gonna grow, is that right?
Plus the landscape wall.
Yeah.
Mr. Seatsman, what's the growth height on an arborvitae in a year?
It depends on the
About a foot, really.
conditions, of course, but if they're clearing out trees, that's the best situation. They should grow 1 to 2 feet a year.
So the fence, if they plant 5, you guys are proposing 5-foot arborvitae's to start?
5 to 6 foot, that's.
5
5
to
to
6.
6.
Okay. So within so if not, if the enclosure is not completely screened by the arborvitae's, it should be within a year.
Well, I think it will be, because they're being planted on top of a 2-foot-high,
Wall area. And they intertwine.
so they're already at 6 feet, 7 feet, 8 feet possibly, and a 6-foot fence behind that.
I asked Mr. Seatsman because he's in that business, so he's our resident expert. Okay, does anybody else on the board have any questions? Yeah,
I have a
Mr.
question,
Dunster.
just to further discussion of the plan. Between the dumpster and Mr. Rifflard's property line, there's the two topographic lines. There's a 314 and 315 foot line. They're like two lines behind the enclosure. Have you been over there, Glenn, to look at this?
Yes.
And Mr. Westbrook brought up the survivability issue without taking additional trees down. In your mind's eye, would they survive in that area between the 315 and 314 foot? It's hard to say, I
I mean, right
realize.
now, I don't recall how
Yeah,
how
okay.
much bottom growth was on those trees
Yeah,
there,
Okay,
but
okay. Because if I thought survivability was reasonable, I think to put another 5 or 6 trees in that area between the dumpster and the residence property.
again, I would hate to see viable trees.
But I don't know,
being
if they're not
taken.
gonna survive, what's the point?
What side are you talking, Rudy? Are you talking to the right of the dumpster or the left?
No, I'm talking to
To the left of the group of 9.
right, to the left of the group of 9,
Right,
right.
okay, right. So
Yeah.
that area
A line
between,
just like that, only a little bit to the west of that group of 9.
Where it says existing trees to remain.
Right, well, that's my question is,
Yeah,
if those trees would severely compromise the survivability of any new plantings, and we don't have an answer to that.
well, what if you
Mr.
left,
Westbrook did testify that he did not believe
He
anything
questioned
would go in
it,
there,
yeah.
that's right.
but what if you left the existing trees and you put another 5 or 6 or 7 arborvitae's directly off the corner of where the dumpster enclosure is? So
That's kind of what I'm saying.
yeah, but it's
Which
not,
is
it's
not
not,
gonna
it's not back in the growth.
Well, that's at the 314, the
What are
314
you
foot
looking to block?
topographic line.
What are we looking to block?
It's already blocked. The trees are already around it.
It's completely.
Dumpsters.
Completely-
We're looking to make this thing
completely
happen
screened
tonight,
off.
that's what we're looking to do.
And if
Say
I may,
5 trees.
to plant trees continuing from the line at the refuse area, you're down close to the pavement. You know, you're screening the pavement, you're not screening a dumpster, but the elevation change, you're climbing up the hill. So they're not really effective at screening trees in that location. So it doesn't serve the purpose that
Just
you're trying to
asking.
achieve.
Just asking.
Anybody have any other questions? Okay, Mr. Whitaker, I guess proceed.
Well, Mr. Amato?
Before you do, does anybody else from the public have any other questions of Mr. Westbrook before we move on? No? Okay, Mr. Whitaker.
Call Amato Glasso to the back. Thank you, Richard. Amato, you've been previously sworn.
Yes.
You've had the opportunity to go out into the field with Mr. Westbrook and authorize him to make modifications to the plan, and those things that you authorized are shown on the plan. You've had the ability to look at this plan well in advance of tonight's hearing, correct?
That's correct.
All right, there was also some other questions that were raised, so I'm gonna take you through that first. You've got a prototype of the sign here, do you not?
Yes.
You just wanna take that, let's get that off the agenda right away.
I mean, it's just a rough sketch, basically. I've spoken to a couple of sign people, I don't know if I should present it.
I'm gonna do it this way. We'll mark this as A5,
There's one to a copy.
just pass around. It's just gonna be a reader board, correct?
Just give me a reader board.
And it's going to meet all of the requirements of the ordinance,
Correct.
and it's not gonna be lit.
No.
And the purpose of the sign is to properly identify the tenants that are in your building.
That's correct.
Is it just gonna be a square sign, or is it
Just a
gonna be a
square
little,
No, square sign, simple. Yeah, just, because we're limited.
could we put a little decorative frame around it with?
I mean, then just.
What's the word I'm looking for here? Something
Like a fringe on it, I guess.
Yeah, something.
I have no problem,
We'll
you know,
curve the
the
edges.
edge will be a little
We'll
nicer.
curve the edges.
I mean, it'll be a square sign, like a.
I know that, but a little something to dress
Yeah.
up a little bit for the neighbors.
No, I understand, yes, that, I mean, it's not gonna just be a flat board, it'll be, yeah, it'll have like a trim around it, but not like all big trim, because otherwise it takes away from the side, side doesn't allow.
Some finials or something
Yeah.
on top of it, something.
Second issue that came up, Mr. Galasso, had to do with obstructions in the stream, which you described to the board what you are stipulating to do.
Yes, that's right.
Go ahead, what is it?
There's just-
Point it out.
Over here on the one side where there's a walking bridge, well now it's like basically a walking bridge because it's two properties that are landlocked out. But we'll be taking care of removing the obstructions so that there's no more water issues. Like because I know every once in a while a tree will get locked up in there, so we're gonna make sure that that's eliminated.
Did you have that and made that decision after you met with Mr. Fisher and you observed the site itself?
That is correct, yes.
And so Mr. Fisher had alluded to it earlier, and you're confirming and stipulating now
Yes.
that that could be a condition of approval.
That is correct, yes.
Are we gonna put a date on that condition of approval? A reasonable date? Have you thought of that? Mr.
Within,
Galasso or Mr. Whitaker?
I mean.
Oh, resolution is next month, right? Appealable time, I guess. You're looking at spring?
Spring. I would know that.
Mr. Glass, did you talk to,
June 30th?
did you talk to the neighbor about that, or did you feel?
No,
you had-
I think the neighbor's fine with it. I don't think he's gonna have an issue with it. It's basically locked out. It's, the only people that are crossing that bridge right now are people that are dog walking. And it's going between two commercial properties, which I don't think he's happy about people cutting through his property anyway.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Galasso, correct me if I'm wrong, but the landscaping that you proposed here is based upon discussions you had in the field, as Mr. Westbrook testified to, with neighbors as to how to properly screen it, correct?
Correct, yes.
And other than those modifications, the testimony you provided the last time at the hearing has not changed, is that correct?
What, I'm sorry?
Your testimony that you gave the last time, everything that you said there,
Everything else.
based on this plan, nothing what you said last meeting has changed.
No.
So it's still the same building, still occupied as you testified to, and all the other improvements that was testified to remain the same.
Correct, yes.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Has there been any change in your tenants since the last meeting?
No.
Could you just go over that stipulation on the bridge again?
The bridge will be removed.
That's what that's what I thought.
As long as we've come back there, maybe you, gentlemen, could coordinate with Mr. Fisher, since he's responsible for the screen, and let Mr. Hanlon know what a reasonable date is.
It's fine.
I mean, I'm happy with 6 months from the adoption of the resolution.
Okay, that's fine.
Fine.
And you put in the resolution that the obstruction will be removed in accordance with Mr. Fisher's recommendations.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Galasso, do you have any further questions? Mr. Galasso, you certainly made efforts to meet with the neighbors and
Yes.
certainly appreciated your attempts to resolve any issues. The people who testified before, did you have an opportunity to meet with them?
In the past, yes.
And was there discussions? What were the substance of the discussions you had with them?
Their concerns, as far as I understood, was that they were more concerned about where the trailers were, and that they could see the trailers from their house and their deck. So we proposed to put these bush line right across here, so that basically we were creating an enclosure for the trailers, so that they wouldn't see the trailers. I mean, that was just as a courtesy to them.
Was there any discussion about additional screening on the
Along this
southwest side of the property where the dumpster enclosure's
No,
proposed?
aside for just covering the dumpster, just to block out the dumpster, no. I mean, I didn't think there was an issue there, because, I mean, there are woods already there, I mean, a certain amount of woods, so there, I mean, I don't know if there's a picture, I didn't realize that was gonna be an issue there. But, I didn't think there was gonna be an issue, because, I mean, other than them just seeing through the parking lot, which has been there since, you know, we're not changing this area at all. This is really the area we were affected, in front of the building, so I didn't think that was an issue for them.
Any other questions of Mr. Galasso before we open it to the public? Okay, so if anybody's listening online who would like to call in, now would be the time, and any members of the public who would like to have questions of Mr. Galasso, please come forward and just identify yourself again. You want to come forward, sir?
Yeah, sure.
Just identify yourself again.
Mike Rifflard, 341 Brookside Ave.
Go ahead, Mr. Flard. You have questions of Mr. Again, this is just for questioning Mr. Galasso.
Right.
At the end of the presentation, you'll have an opportunity to make a statement into anything you want, as well as will your wife. But right now, it's questions of Mr. Galasso.
Well, yeah, then I guess I really don't have anything, because it was just back to the dumpster. And if we're gonna have a general discussion, then I guess we can talk at the end. I don't really have a question from that, other than, just screening this area a little bit, that's all. I know we did discuss this, we definitely discussed that. You said you were gonna take care of that, you couldn't do anything until, you were told you were allowed to, which I understand all that, that's fine. Is there, and these are 5-foot trees with a 6-foot fence?
There's a 6-foot fence, perimeter here, around it, it's gonna be enclosed, completely enclosed off, in the front, it'll be 8, so we don't want people throwing, garbage in there. And then these are gonna be bushes that are gonna go up already, and this is already at an elevated level, this is already starting to come up to the berm level that's up here. So this is, by the time we reach here, that's already 4 foot high, so that's already encroaching upwards, so this is actually getting cut into the ground.
That's what I was gonna ask, is this in the parking lot now, or is it gonna be
No,
going back further?
This is the existing parking lot.
You have to speak up a little bit, I'm sorry.
And I believe we're adding one more spot, and then this is gonna be
People on the-
the grass area.
Oh, no, don't.
Oh.
Wait, so that's cut into the grass.
Gentlemen,
Gentlemen,
hold on. Gentlemen, hold on. Just a minute. I think we lost our live stream, so just hold on for a minute, okay?
Is it frozen or is it gone? Frozen. Can you hear us on there? Do you have audio?
No, it's all through my phone.
All right, give us a minute, okay, guys?
You don't mind if we talk amongst ourselves off the record, right?
As long as it's off the record and you're away from the microphones. Why don't you guys go in the back and talk?
So you can hear, okay. Denise has us on in the overflow room and she can hear us on YouTube, so we're good.
All right, so
Okay.
she can hear us, but then nobody can see us?
They
You want to
can-
give those guys a
they
minute?
can- she
Why don't you
said
let
we're
them talk
fine.
for a minute,
She
maybe?
can see us and-
Maybe they can work out whatever issues they have. Mr. Whitaker, do you have anything else in the meantime?
I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman, now.
Okay.
We can bring them back in. We're gonna tackle-
Well, give them a minute to talk.
Take 2 minutes in the hallway, Mike.
Yeah, they may be able to work out.
It's about 15
issues they
minutes
have.
in the room.
Absolutely.
That would be great.
You don't have any other witnesses, correct, Mr. Whitaker? Just remind everybody that the mics are still on though, so anything that's said is gonna be recorded.
I think the one question that might have come up, nobody has asked, when will the plantings and everything occur after resolution is passed and as long as weather still permits this year?
Okay, well, they're back. Okay, so we're apparently back on the record from what I understand. So, why don't you guys, however you want to handle it.
Anything to add?
Nothing,
Based on
personal,
discussion?
no.
Okay.
No, we discussed it, he understands,
Yeah, we're good.
Are you good?
Yep.
Okay, very good.
Thanks.
Mrs. Riflard, do you have any questions?
No.
If I'm pronouncing your name right. Okay, is anybody else from the public want to ask Mr. Galasso any questions? And no one's called in, correct, Maureen?
Nope.
Okay. Seeing no one coming forward and nobody on the phone, we're going to close the public questioning of Mr. Galasso. And does the board have any other questions before Mr. Whitaker moves off? Scott Fisher, go ahead.
For the applicant. Are you prepared to get moving on this project, like tomorrow, if you were given?
if we were given approval tonight, the first thing that we wanna do is we wanna start moving forward with this, preparing the screening, actually. for the
My
main-
question is based on the time of year
Yeah.
and the planting season at hand. So, all right, thank you.
We're-
I had learned, and Mr. Cecil couldn't correct me, but I had learned that if you try to plant arborvitae end of November, because I did, or thought of it, that a certain arborist in Wyckoff said, don't you do it. Am I right?
You don't wanna go past the middle of November.
That's right.
I saw neighbors do that on the old drive.
They all said
Specifically.
with
if
a
it's
brown
in
wall,
container.
yeah.
Specifically if it's in a container, that's for sure.
And when can it be picked up again?
April.
And that's why we're trying to prevent the screening, because right now, we're all in here, and I've got pictures, but all in here, it's kind of like a weird weeds, that these are gonna all drop, and it's gonna be, you're gonna be able to see straight through from the house of Mr. Brackett and Mr. Short, you'll be able to see straight through to my building once the winter hits again. So, the idea was.
If you plant them, keep them irrigated.
Water and water and water. All right, that was all I have.
All right, anybody else? Okay. Anything further, Mr. Whitaker?
Mr. Chairman, that concludes our presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Galasso. Okay, we're gonna open it up to public comment. Anybody who may be online, now would be your time to call in. I'll repeat the number, 201-891-7000, extension 222. And is anybody present in the room or in the overflow room who would like to make a statement at this time? Yes, sir, please come forward. State your name and your address. I know we've seen you here before, but for the record.
I don't know if I can see you, but they don't fog up. Tim Brackett.
How you doing, Mr. Brackett?
358 Crescent Avenue in Wyckoff.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead, sir.
I just want to clarify that about when the planting can occur. And be sure that the intent is to start immediately. That's all. Just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, as a practical matter, I don't know, if we were to grant this application, can work start before a resolution is signed?
Yeah, at the applicant's risk. He can start at his own risk. You know.
May I ask what that risk would be?
Well, the risk would be if for some reason, something came up or an appeal were taken or something, you might have to take it out again. That's the risk.
In other words, there's
You might have to, any applicant.
Go ahead.
And correct me, Kevin or Mark, can start an application before the memorializing resolution at their own risk. And the risk would be that they have to undo whatever they did should it not be memorialized in a timely, or if an appeal is taken or something.
Excuse me, let's cut it to the quick. If we have an approval, the planting will be done. And it'll start now before I have a written resolution.
Okay, so he's willing to start it. Well, Mr.
And
Booth.
that's something that's completely out of the ordinary in most land use applications.
Yeah, what Mr. Bunch is referring to is that there would be an appeal period. So conceivably, someone could come up and could appeal. If we grant the application, they could appeal it. If they won the appeal, our decision would be reversed. So what Mr. Whitaker is saying is Mr. Galasso is willing to take that risk and start the work right away, so that it would be completed before the winter time.
Okay. That's my last issue.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Brackett.
And I'd like to thank Mr. Glasgow for taking care of changing the wetlands and doing, relieving all of my concerns, which he has.
I'm sure he appreciates that. And we do appreciate Mr. Galasso working with the neighbors. Always makes it easier, our job easier too, so. Anybody else like to make a statement before we close the public session?
Is this for the general comment?
Yes.
Let me see if we
I don't think we have anybody on the line, but
No.
Maureen's just
No.
checking. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so we will close the open public comment section, and, okay. Anybody want to start on this? Mr. Booch, why don't you give us your feeling on this?
Why me?
Well, you seem to have a lot of opinions on it.
I want to echo the chairman's comment for the gratitude of the board, I think the entire board, that you took the initiative to reach out to the neighbors and work with them one-on-one and come up with a solution to the screening, which has been an ongoing problem since we started with this, I guess close to a year ago now. So I appreciate that, and the neighbors and you work together. I think it's an improvement. The bridge will be removed, which is significant for the township. I've said to the people I've talked to on the board that, the board also has to protect the interests of the township, and we are doing that here. And I think it's an improvement, with the understanding, that Mr. Galasso can create more parking, he can do things with his property. I think this solves some of the problems. If I had my druthers, I'd like to see 7 more arborvitae between that dumpster and the property line, but, if it falls okay, I'm okay with it. So, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Butcher.
I just want to ask a question. I think we ought to consider
we're adding a condition that the bridge is gonna be removed in 6 months. I think maybe we ought to address what would happen if it's not removed in 6 months. Does that mean that all the approvals are gonna go by the wayside? Or,
Well, I guess if there,
What
we
situation?
could make a condition, and if there's an issue as to why it's not, then I guess Mr. Whitaker would have to come back and explain it to the board, right?
You put a condition in a resolution that says it will be removed within 6 months of the adoption of the resolution. If it's not, Chairman's correct, you call us back. In most instances, in your resolution, you're going to probably provide for the creation of a developer's agreement, which I've used many a time with Mr. Landell. So after you've given approval, this was some other applications here, Mr. Landell sends me a developer's agreement that says these are the things that have to be done within a certain period of time. So there's, and that's the contract with the borough, with the township. So that's what we'll be talking about.
Right. There's usually bonding that's required, things along those lines, so there are some protections for the town as well.
And I suspect, Mr. Colosso, speak out of turn, but you've engaged somebody already and you've gotten a quote to go and get it done, correct? Okay. So there's a good possibility that by the time you're adopting a resolution, the equipment will be out there to get this done.
Okay, anybody else have any comments? I mean, I'll say on my part that, yeah, Mr. Galasso certainly has been proactive in this matter. He's made an effort, obviously, to consult with all the involved parties, all the neighbors. He's obviously, been able to forestall a lot of issues that had originally come before the board. Mr. Boonstra mentioned that there is a benefit to the town here by the removal of the bridge. And, overall, it's going to allow him to create more parking so that he'll actually have more than's required based on the size of the property. So he's eliminating that problem. There is additional screening, and I personally don't see the negative to the application. So does anybody else want to make any comments? My understanding is that if this was approved, it would be subject to all the plantings being sprinklered. There would be, it would be subject to the bridge being removed within 6 months of the signing of the resolution. And Mr. Seatsma, you had, you said you didn't want the arborvitae's potted, you wanted them...
I would make that recommendation, that they should not be in a container. They should be balled and burlapped at this time of year.
Balled and burlapped? Well, it's certainly something we could put in the resolution. I assume you don't have an objection to
No
that?
problem at all.
Okay. Was there anything else we missed? I don't think so. Okay. If nobody has any objections, can somebody make that motion?
Motion to approve application as presented.
Subject to the stipulations just presented?
I'll second it.
We have a roll call, Maureen?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Riato?
Yes.
Mr. Homechak?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Seetsma?
Yes.
Mr. Boonstra?
Yes.
Mr. Pervin?
Yes.
Mr. Alexandru?
Yes.
Mr. On?
Yes.
Mayor Shannon?
Yes.
Chairman Protumano?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. And thank you, everyone from the public for coming out. Have a good evening. And thank you to the members of the board. And to Maureen, thank you very much for your hard work. Motion to adjourn?
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Thank you, Maureen.
All right, take care. Thanks for coming out, Mr. Brown.
Yes, thank you, Bruce. Thank you.
I don't know how you do it.
Thank you, brother. Do you want all these?